The wind was a lonely song that morning. It came crawling over the far hills like a tired pilgrim, dragging whispers of dust and dry grass behind it. The sun had not yet broken the edge of the earth, but its pale glow bruised the horizon in hues of rose and ash. He rode slow, his shadow long and thin against the plain. The horse beneath him moved like an old friend, hooves making hollow thuds on the hard ground. Each step sounded like a memory he didn't want to remember. The cowboy's name was Eli Ward, though few cared enough to speak it anymore. Out here, a man was often just another shape in the wilderness, and that suited him fine. He carried no laughter in his pockets, only the quiet weight of years. His life had been a road of dust and silence since fever took the ones who once called him home. Eli kept his eyes low, watching the earth for signs, a stray hoof print, a snake's slither. He wasn't looking for trouble. Trouble, in his experience, had a way of finding him. It happened like this. A sound, thin as a thread, soft as a dying breath, slid through the wind. He reined in the horse, head tilting, ears straining. At first, he thought it was the wind's old trick, mimicking voices to toy with a lonely man's mind. But then it came again, a sound so small, so cracked with weakness, it hardly seemed real. A single word, broken like a feather in the dirt. "Mama." The reins tightened in Eli's hand. He blinked hard, scanning the emptiness around him. The plain stretched endless, no cabin, no camp, no living soul. Only brittle grass bowing under the breath of the wind. Again, the sound. Fainter now, like the echo of a dream. He swung down from the saddle, boots crunching on dry earth. The air smelled of dust and old rain, heavy with silence. Slowly, carefully, he walked toward the whisper that didn't belong in this cruel land. And then he saw it. A burlap sack, half buried in the weeds near the bend of a dry creek bed. Knotted with rough rope, stained dark with something he didn't want to name. The thing twitched just barely. Eli's breath locked in his chest. He knelt, fingers trembling as they worked the rope loose. The fibers bit his skin, stubborn as sin, but the knot gave at last. The sack peeled open like a wound. Inside, a baby, a little scrap of life swaddled in rags, her cheeks hollow, lips cracked, eyes shut tight against the dying world. But her chest moved, thin, shuddering breaths that sounded more like prayers than air. And then, as Eli bent closer, he heard it, soft, raw, impossibly small. "Mama!" His heart clenched like a fist. For a long, aching moment, he couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only stare at this fragile thing fate had dropped in his path. There were marks on the child's skin where the rope had pressed too hard. Her hands curled like tiny claws, nails bitten down by hunger. Whoever left her here did not mean for her to be found. Eli swallowed hard. His throat felt carved from stone. Somewhere deep inside, something broke open, a place he'd boarded up years ago when the fever came and took everything warm from his life. He remembered another voice, another cry, a promise he failed to keep. He wrapped the baby in his coat, pulling her close against his chest. She was so light he could barely feel her, yet her weight crushed every hollow in his soul. "Easy now," he whispered, voice raw as the prairie wind. "Easy, little one, you're safe." Safe. The word felt like a lie in this land, where mercy came slow and often too late. Eli rose, the child bundled in his arms, and turned toward his horse. His jaw set hard, the way a man's does when he knows a storm is coming. Not from the sky, but from the hearts of men. Who would do this? Who would bind a child in a sack and leave her for the buzzards? As he swung into the saddle, cradling her close, a shadow of rage stirred inside him. Not the loud kind, all guns and shouting. No, this was quieter, deeper, the kind that waits, sharp as a blade in the dark. The horse started forward, hooves drumming a solemn beat across the land. The sun finally split the horizon, casting bars of gold over the plains. Eli didn't look back. There was nothing behind him worth a damn. He glanced down at the small face tucked against his chest. The baby stirred, lips twitching like she was still chasing that lost word. "Mama!" Eli felt something hot sting his eyes. He let the wind take it before it could fall. "Who did this to you, little one?" he murmured to the endless sky. "And why do I feel like you just changed everything for me?" The plains offered no answer, only the hollow cry of a distant hawk. But Eli knew this much: he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not ever. Ahead, the land stretched wide, a hard road of dust and secrets. And somewhere out there, he reckoned, was a story darker than the sack he'd found, and a fight he hadn't asked for, but one he'd damn sure take on. The wind rose again, restless, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else, something like the first stirrings of fate. The rain came at sundown, not the soft, forgiving kind, but a hard rain, slanting like nails against the earth. It swept over the plains in gray sheets, swallowing the horizon whole. Eli reached his cabin just as the first thunder rolled, a deep growl crawling across the sky. The place was nothing fancy. For walls of rough-hewn logs, a roof patched with tin that sang when the wind hit it just right. Inside, the smell of wood smoke clung to everything like an old friend. Eli pushed the door wide with his shoulder and stepped in, cradling the child as if she were spun from glass. The fire in the hearth had died down to embers, but a few strokes of the poker brought it back to life. Golden light spilled over the room, chasing the shadows from the corners. He set the baby on a folded quilt near the fire, his coat still wrapped tight around her small frame. She made a sound, thin, almost questioning, and Eli found himself answering, voice low and rough. "You're all right now." He fetched water from the barrel, warmed some on the stove, and soaked a rag to press to her lips. The first drops touched her tongue, and she swallowed with a trembling effort that wrenched his chest wide open. Hunger was a cruel thief. It stole strength first, then hope. He moved slow, patient, coaxing her with more water, then a little milk he'd been saving for coffee. When she finished, her lashes fluttered, heavy as rain-soaked feathers. Eli sat back on his heels, studying her like a man staring at a miracle he didn't ask for but couldn't walk away from. For a long while, the only sound was the rain hammering the roof and the fire cracking in quiet rebellion against the storm. Eli leaned an elbow on his knee, hand covering his mouth, eyes on the little bundle. Questions churned in his mind like black water. Who tied her in that sack? Who left her to die in the dirt? And why did her faint, broken voice keep echoing through him like church bells in an empty town? He thought of the words she'd whispered, "Mama." Somewhere out there, was a mother bleeding her soul out in the dark? Or was that word just a ghost of instinct, spoken to a world that had already turned its back? Eli dragged a hand down his face, feeling the roughness of days-old stubble. A man could ride 1,000 miles and never find an answer. But something in him said this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The wind moaned outside like a lost thing, and Eli rose to bar the door. He threw another log on the fire, then crouched beside the baby again. Her tiny fist had worked its way free of the quilt. He touched it gently, so small, like a bird's wing folded against the storm. "You ain't alone no more," he said softly, surprising himself. "Not while I got breath." He didn't know it yet, but somewhere out beyond the walls of that lonely cabin, a woman was walking through hell for the same scrap of life he now vowed to keep. The road was mud and blood under Clara's boots. Each step felt like it tore another piece of her soul loose, but she kept moving because to stop was to die, and worse, to let hope die with her. The rain beat down, plastering her hair to her face, chilling her bones through the threadbare dress that clung like a second skin. Her shawl was gone, torn from her in the struggle. The rope burns on her wrists still wept in thin red lines, though the rain tried to wash them away. She whispered the name again, the one she'd given her baby when the world was still a softer place. Her lips cracked around it, but she spoke like prayer. "Lily." Her throat burned raw. Every breath tasted of rust and rain. She stumbled on a rock, went down hard, and stayed there a moment, palms sinking into the mud. For a heartbeat, she wanted to let it take her, wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Because what kind of mother loses her child? Then she saw the sack again, the image branded behind her eyes. The man's hands, rough and merciless, shoving that small bundle inside like it was trash to be burned. Her scream had torn the sky that day, but no one came. No one ever came, except him, the man she once trusted, the man who put the ring on her finger and promised her forever. Promises, she'd learned, were cheaper than dust. He called Lily a curse, called Clara weak for wanting to keep her, said no man with sense would carry the weight of a squalling brat. His eyes had been full of something she couldn't name until it was too late, a hunger not for love, but for power over something smaller than him. She ran when she could, fought until her nails split and her knuckles bled. But he tied her and left her under that merciless sun, said if she wanted the baby so bad, she could follow and die with her. Clara cut herself free on a jagged rock, tearing skin to shreds, and ran until her legs screamed. But the plains were wide, and the world was cruel, and the storm was coming like a pack of wolves. Now she crawled to her feet, eyes burning with more than rain. Somewhere out there, Lily was breathing. She had to believe it, had to believe the sack was not her grave. And if by some grace her baby still lived, Clara would find her, or she'd die clawing at the earth trying. Back in the cabin, Eli stirred a pot of beans over the fire, though he had no appetite. He kept glancing at the little figure curled in the quilt, chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm. Outside, the storm raged harder, drumming on the roof like fists. Lightning flashed, slicing the dark, and for a moment, Eli saw his reflection in the window, a tired man with eyes that had seen too much. "You're a damn fool," he muttered under his breath. Could have kept writing, could have left it to the buzzards, but he knew he couldn't have. Not after that voice in the wind, not after holding that tiny heartbeat in his arms. The child stirred then, a soft whimper breaking through the crackle of the fire. Eli crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt, hand resting lightly on the quilt. "It's all right," he said again, the words tasting strange but not unwelcome. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you now." He didn't hear the hoofbeats out in the distance, masked by rain and thunder. Didn't see the shadow that moved across the ridge like a ghost with vengeance in its bones. And he didn't know that by morning, fate would bring another soul to his door, a soul as battered as the land, and just as stubborn to live. Dawn came quiet after the storm, the kind of quiet that feels like the land is holding its breath. The sky was a pale wash of silver, clouds dragging their weary bellies across the horizon. Rain still clung to every blade of grass, turning the earth soft and heavy underfoot. Eli stepped out onto the porch, mug of coffee warming his hands, steam curling into the morning chill. His eyes swept the plain, that endless ocean of muted green and brown. After last night's rage, it looked washed clean, like even God wanted to forget what men were capable of. Inside, the baby slept. He could hear her faint breaths from where he stood, a rhythm so fragile it made him ache. He'd hardly slept himself, spent half the night checking she was still there, still breathing, as though she might vanish like a dream if he blinked too long. Eli took a slow sip, eyes narrowing against the pale light. Out here, a man learned to listen to the land, the rustle of grass, the cry of a hawk, the distant drum of hooves. This morning, something felt off. Not wrong, exactly, but different, like a note struck out of tune. He set the mug down and scanned the ridge beyond the creek bed. Nothing but mist and empty sky. He told himself he was chasing ghosts. And yet, a shape moved far off, small, stumbling. Then another step, and another, like a shadow, fighting to stay upright. Eli's jaw tightened. He went for his rifle, slung by the door, but didn't raise it. Not yet. He watched as the shape grew clearer. A woman, soaked to the skin, dress torn and clinging like a shroud. Her hair hung in dark ropes around her face. She moved like every bone in her body hurt, but she kept moving. Eli crossed the yard in long strides, boots sinking in the wet earth. When he reached her, she was on her knees, fingers clawing at the mud, as if the earth itself might give her back what she'd lost. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, steady, though something in him already knew. "You're hurt." Her head lifted slow, heavy as a stone, eyes rimmed raw with rain and grief. She looked at him, but not like she saw him. more like she saw the question burning in his hands. My baby, the words tore from her like fabric ripping, thin and ragged. Where's my baby? For a heartbeat, Eli just stood there, the world narrowing to those two broken syllables. Then he knelt in the mud, set the rifle aside, and said the only thing that mattered. She's safe. The woman sagged forward, a sound breaking from her throat that was part sob, part prayer. Eli caught her before she hit the ground, arms closing around a body that felt more bone than flesh. She clung to him with the strength of a drowning soul finding a rope. Inside the cabin, the baby stirred as if some invisible thread had pulled tight between them. Clara woke to warmth, the first she'd felt in days. A fire whispered in the hearth, and something soft lay beneath her cheek. For a moment, she didn't move, afraid if she opened her eyes, the cruel world would come rushing back. Then a sound, small, sweet, like the sigh of an angel's breath. Her eyes flew open, and there, on a folded quilt near the fire, lay the tiny scrap of life that had kept her soul from breaking clean in two. Lily. The name fell from Clara's lips like a psalm. She crawled across the floor on shaking hands and gathered her baby close. The child whimpered, then nuzzled against her with a sound that undid every knot of pain in her chest. Clara pressed her face into that fragile warmth and wept like the sky outside had emptied itself into her bones. Behind her, a voice spoke, rough as gravel but soft at the edges. She took a little milk, slept some, stronger than she looks. Clara turned, clutching the baby as if the world might snatch her away again. The man stood by the table, tall, broad-shouldered, hat in hand. His hair was dark, streaked with gray at the temples, and his eyes. God, those eyes. Not the sharp, greedy kind she'd learned to fear. These were steady as a river stone, holding no judgment, only a quiet weight, like he'd carried too much for too long. Her voice cracked. You found her? He nodded once. Yesterday, out by the creek. His jaw tightened. In a sack. Clara's stomach lurched. The room tilted, and she had to grip the baby tighter just to keep breathing. I tried, she choked out. God knows I tried to stop him. Eli said nothing at first. Just looked at her with that steady gaze, letting her words fall like brittle leaves between them. He said she'd ruin us, Clara whispered. Said a man don't need dead weight. I begged him. Her voice broke, splintering under the weight of memory. He tied me, left me out there like I was nothing. If the rain hadn't come, loose the knots. Her eyes found his, hollow with shame and something fiercer, something that still burned despite all the world had done to snuff it out. I didn't leave her, she said, fierce now, trembling but unbroken. I'd die before I left her. I believe you. The words came low, certain like a stone dropping into deep water. And Clara felt something shift in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Safety. Not in the walls, not in the fire, but in the way this man spoke like truth was still worth saying. Silence stretched, but it wasn't the sharp kind. It was soft like a blanket pulled against the cold. Eli moved slow, pouring coffee into a tin cup, then setting it on the table near her. You need strength, he said simply. Storm's not done yet. Clara hesitated, then reached with a hand that shook so hard she nearly spilled it. The first sip burned her tongue, bitter and black, but it felt like life clawing its way back into her bones. The baby stirred, gave a tiny cry, and Clara hushed her, pressing a kiss to that small, downy head. Eli watched from across the room, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. For a while, there was only the crackle of fire and the slow breath of two souls who'd both seen too much. Then Eli spoke, voice like distant thunder. The man who did this, he ain't gonna stop easy. Clara's fingers tightened on the quilt. Fear flickered across her face, but beneath it, something harder sparked. No, she said. He won't. Eli nodded once, like a man making peace with the fight he didn't ask for, but knew was coming. Then we'd best be ready. Outside, the sky was darkening again, and far off, riding the edge of the storm, a shadow moved, a man with a gun, and a soul black as the clouds above him. The wind carried his promise like poison. If I can't bury you in the ground, I'll burn the world around you. Night came crawling slow and mean, like a coyote with hunger in its belly. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of wet earth and something darker, something that felt like the breath before a scream. Eli sat by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the horizon for trouble he knew would come. He didn't tell Clara, but his bones had been whispering it since sundown. Men like the one she'd fled didn't let go easy. They didn't know how. Behind him, the cabin glowed with firelight. Shadows danced across the walls, softening the hard lines of a life built on loneliness. Clara sat near the hearth, the baby cradled against her chest, small hand curled in the fabric of her dress. Eli turned his head, just enough to see them in the flicker. The sight hit him like a blow, not for the hurt of it, but for the way it stitched something back together inside him. Something he thought had died years ago, under the fever and the grave. Clara caught his gaze and held it for a breath too long. There was fear in her eyes, yes, but also fire, the kind that survives storms and men's cruelty. The kind that says, I will not break. Eli looked away first, not out of shame, but because looking too long felt like standing on the edge of something he wasn't sure he deserved. Then the wind changed. Sharp, bitter, carrying with it a sound that turned his blood to stone. The distant drum of hooves, riding hard. Eli rose slow, like a tree bending before the storm. He crossed the room, checked the latch on the door, then met Clara's eyes. It's him, she whispered, voice fraying at the edges. Eli nodded once. Stay low. Keep her quiet. Her arms tightened around the baby like a lifeline. Eli felt a weight settle in his chest, heavier than fear. He'd seen death before, looked it in the eye, and walked away. But this time, the stakes were breathing soft and small by the fire. He moved to the door, every motion quiet as snowfall, slid the rifle to his shoulder. The hoofbeats grew louder, pounding like a war drum across the plain. Then came the light, ghostly threads of moon sliding through torn clouds, just enough to paint the shape of a man riding fast, hat low, rage riding with him like a second skin. The horse skidded to a halt in the yard, mud flying under its hooves. The rider swung down in one fluid motion, boots hitting the ground like gunshots. Clara! His voice cracked the night, wide open, raw, venomous. You think you can run from me? Eli stepped onto the porch, rifle leveled. His silhouette cut against the glow spilling from the door, calm as a stone in a river. She ain't yours to claim, Eli said, voice low but carrying like distant thunder. The man's head snapped up, eyes glittering like broken glass. Rain streaked his face, mingling with the sweat of fury. Stay out of this, old man. His hand hovered near the gun at his hip. She's mine. Always was. Eli didn't move, didn't blink. No man owns what he can't cherish. For a beat, silence fell, thick, trembling, split only by the hiss of rain on the roof. Then the world exploded. The villain's hand went for iron. Eli's finger tightened in the same breath. Two shots cracked like lightning, one slicing the air, the other biting deep into wood. Splinters flew. The smell of gunpowder bloomed, sharp as blood in the throat. The man lunged for the porch, teeth bared like a beast. Eli met him head-on, rifle swinging wide, stock slamming into bone. They crashed against the wall, fists and fury tangling in the dark. Inside, Clara pressed herself against the hearth, the baby muffled against her breast. Tears burned her eyes, but she bit them back. Fear could not win tonight. Outside, the storm bellowed like a mad god. Rain sheeted down, washing blood and mud into one red river under their boots. Eli felt fire lance through his side, a knife, quick and mean, but he didn't fall. Couldn't. The villain grinned through blood, breath ragged. You think you can save her? He spat. You think she wants you? Eli drove his fist into that sneer, hard enough to feel bone give way. The man staggered, slipped in the mud. His hand fumbled for the gun again, just as Eli swung the rifle up and fired. The shot split the night like judgment. The man went still, face twisting once before he hit the earth with a sound that wasn't thunder but might as well have been. For a long, breathless moment, the only sound was rain on the roof and the distant cry of a morning wind. Eli stood swaying, rifle slack in his hands, blood seeping hot through his shirt. Pain roared in his side, but he stayed upright until he saw Clara in the doorway, baby in her arms, eyes wide as the sky. "It's done," he rasped, voice shredded. "You're safe." She was at his side in a heartbeat, arm sliding under his to hold him steady. Her tears spilled now, warm against the cold night, as she pressed her forehead to his shoulder. "You fool," she whispered, fierce and breaking all at once. "You damn fool." Eli let out a rough breath that might have been a laugh if it hadn't hurt so much. His gaze dropped to the baby nestled against Clara's heart, eyes closed, lips soft as a rosebud in spring. "Worth it," he said, quiet as the rain. She looked at him, then, really looked, and in that gaze something passed between them. Not promises, not words, just a truth deep enough to outlast storms. They half stumbled back into the cabin, leaving the dead to the mercy of the mud. The fire burned low, throwing a golden hush across the room. Clara eased him into the chair by the hearth, hands gentle but sure. The baby stirred, gave a sleepy sigh, and Eli felt the sound carve hope into the hollows of his soul. Outside, the wind carried the last growl of thunder over the ridge. Inside, life began again, not with vows or grand declarations, but with the quiet strength of two broken roads finding a place to meet. Eli closed his eyes, pain pulling him under, and heard her voice like a prayer in the dark. "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in years, he believed it. Out here, the land was hard and men were harder. But even in a world carved from dust and blood, mercy could bloom like wildflowers after rain. Sometimes, all it takes is a single cry in the wind to remind us what it means to fight and what it means to love. If this story stirred something in you, let us know where in this wide world you're watching from. Like, share, and subscribe for more tales of courage, love, and the untamed West.